You staple the final page of the eviction plea. Mr. Ramirez shakes your hand, his grip weak but grateful, and walks into the pouring rain. You lock the deadbolt on your storefront law clinic. It has been a brutal 14-hour day of fighting lost causes for people who cannot pay you. A violent crash shakes the frosted glass. You flinch. A man kicks the door open, splintering the cheap frame into jagged shards. He is drenched, frantic, and he isn't holding a subpoena. He drags a panic-stricken accountant by the collar. The accountant clutches a rigged laptop, the screen flashing red with a federal asset freeze countdown timer. The man in the trench coat shoved the whimpering accountant onto your reception desk, sweeping your files to the floor. You hold up your hands. You tell them you do pro bono work. You fight unlawful evictions and file bankruptcy paperwork. You point to the corporate high-rises downtown, visible through the rain-streaked window. That is where the high-powered fixers are. The man shakes his head. He pulls a suppressed pistol from his waistband and levels it at your chest. He doesn't want a downtown suit. He wants you. He demands an immediate emergency injunction to block a DEA server seizure happening at their warehouse in exactly 20 minutes. Fix it, he says. You look at the flashing laptop. You look at your outdated law books. You lack the jurisdiction. You lack the clearance for a federal block. But you have a login to the district court's emergency e-filing system, and you have a desperate need to survive the night. You drag your keyboard closer, hands shaking violently. You calculate statutory loopholes in your head. You must draft a phantom motion, forge a magistrate's digital signature, and route it through the shadow docket before federal agents breach their doors. You pray the system does not flag your IP address. You type frantically. The accountant groans in terror. The gunman watches, the barrel of his weapon never wavering from your heart. You find a microscopic jurisdictional error in the scanned federal warrant. You exploit it without hesitation. You hit submit. The screen turns a brilliant green. The freeze is lifted. The raid is halted on a technicality you manufactured out of thin air. The gunman steps forward, drops a vacuum-sealed brick of $100 bills onto your keyboard, and drags the accountant out into the dark alley. You are completely alone. You stare at the $50,000 in cash, listening to the rain. You do not know what to do. The logical move is to call the authorities immediately, report the breach, hand over the illicit cash, and beg for witness protection. But your clinic is exactly 3 weeks away from foreclosure. The bank is threatening to seize your childhood home. Your law school loans are a crushing weight, and every month you drown a little faster. You saw the dead, unblinking eyes of the man with the suppressed gun. Calling the police might get you killed before the ink on your statement dries. You wipe the cold sweat from your desk. You sweep the shattered door frame into a neat pile. You shove the cash into the false bottom of your heavy filing cabinet, right beneath the discarded tax forms nobody audits. You tell yourself it is an anomaly, a terrifying one-time collision with a violent underworld. 3 nights later, a burner phone you did not purchase vibrates in your locked drawer. It is 2 a.m. You answer the encrypted device, your breath catching. A modulated voice tells you they need a localized wire transfer routed through 3 anonymous shell companies before sunrise. Double the financial compensation. You should sever the connection. You should run. But you look at the bright red foreclosure notice pinned to your corkboard. You type in the routing coordinates. The next client is a cartel lieutenant facing an immediate midnight extradition order. You do not ask questions about the blood on his shirt. You draft a writ of habeas corpus laced with fabricated human rights violations, delaying the transport indefinitely. They leave a duffel bag of unmarked bills in your rusted sedan. You start leaving your side entrance unlocked on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The whispers spread through the city's dark arteries. A notorious hacker needs his digital footprint erased from a subpoenaed server. You file a flurry of baseless suppression motions, bearing the district attorney in procedural red tape until the data is wiped. A smuggler needs clean titles for a massive fleet of impounded vehicles. You forge the corporate ownership documents, laundering the physical assets through dummy corporations established in the Cayman Islands. They all pay in untraceable cash. They never ask your real name, and you know better than to ask theirs. You convince yourself you are still a real lawyer. You upgrade your servers. You pay off the clinic's massive debt. You cover your mother's medical bills without flinching. You are thriving in the shadows, fueled by adrenaline and greed. 6 months blur by in a chaotic haze of midnight injunctions and encrypted wire transfers. You have made more capital in half a year than in your entire decade of legitimate legal practice. The filing cabinet is overflowing. You lease a secure safety deposit box under a forged alias just to store the cash. You feel incredibly capable and untouchable, a necessary gear in a much larger, darker machine. That hubris is your ultimate downfall. It happens on a cold Thursday. You finish drafting a non-disclosure agreement for a violent extortionist around 2 in the morning. You lock the clinic doors and step into the freezing air of the side alley. A matte black armored SUV is idling in the shadows. You do not notice the operatives until they are upon you. 2 men step out of the darkness, moving with terrifying precision. Before you can draw a breath to scream, a heavy canvas hood is yanked brutally over your head. The world goes black. They hurl you into the back of the vehicle. Panic seizes your chest, making it impossible to breathe. After a dizzying transit full of sharp turns meant to disorient you, the SUV abruptly stops. You are dragged out roughly, the concrete echoing beneath your stumbling feet. The air here does not smell like the damp alley. It smells of ozone, espresso, and industrial floor cleaner. They march you into an elevator that ascends for what feels like an eternity. They push you down a carpeted corridor and force you into a heavy leather chair. The thick zip ties binding your bruised wrists are severed with a blade. The hood is ripped away. You blink rapidly against the blinding fluorescent light. You are not in a warehouse or a basement. You are in the hyper-modern, pristine penthouse boardroom of a monolithic corporate skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooks the sleeping city below. At the head of a massive mahogany conference table sits a man reading a leather-bound dossier. He is the architect, the phantom executive who controls the city's underground economy, the untouchable syndicate boss. He looks up. His eyes are devoid of empathy. He slides a towering stack of financial documents across the polished wood. The federal government is freezing his global assets in exactly 3 hours. You stare at the towering stack of documents. You shake your head, your voice trembling. You tell him this is legally impossible. You explain you are just a street-level fixer handling localized injunctions and minor money laundering. You tell him he needs a floor of Ivy League corporate attorneys to untangle a multinational federal freeze. A man in a tailored suit steps out of the shadows, resting his hand casually on a holstered tactical firearm. He tells you Ivy League attorneys ask too many questions. They keep dangerous records and have ethical boundaries. You do not. The syndicate boss leans forward, his voice a quiet rasp. He tells you that you kept his reckless lieutenants out of federal prison for 6 months, using forged signatures and phantom motions in a rundown storefront. He demands that exact brand of raw ruthlessness now. You look at the armed guard. You look at the digital 3-hour countdown ticking on the wall monitor. You know exactly what happens if that clock hits 0. You pull the encrypted laptop toward you. You plunge headfirst into the corporate labyrinth. You work with a frantic, desperate intensity. The next 2 hours are a blur of keystrokes and high-wire legal acrobatics. You create a rapid cascade of shell companies and jurisdictions that explicitly do not share extradition treaties. You draft emergency arbitration clauses that legally insulate his core assets from federal reach. You exploit a microscopic loophole in international maritime trade law, reclassifying his illicit billions as protected sovereign debt. Sweat stings your eyes. Your heart hammers against your ribs like a trapped bird. With exactly 5 minutes left, you execute the final transfer protocol. The confirmation screen flashes brilliant green. The assets are shielded. The federal warrants are neutralized. You push away from the table, gasping for air. You survived. You did the impossible. You stand up, legs shaking violently, and demand to be returned to your clinic. You tell them you are completely done. The boss closes the dossier. He does not smile. He presses a button on his desk. The frosted glass doors of the boardroom slide shut and lock with a heavy magnetic slam. You turn around in sheer panic. The boss stands and walks toward the corner of the room. He gestures to a beautifully furnished annex. Inside is a massive mahogany desk, dual encrypted monitors, and a pristine cot. He tells you a talent like yours is far too valuable for a filthy alleyway. You tell him no, your voice cracking. You tell him you have a life, a clinic that needs you. He assures you the clinic burned to the ground an hour ago, a tragic electrical fire. Everyone thinks you perished in the roaring flames. Your debts are erased. Your old life is ashes. You rush to the reinforced glass, pounding your fists against the unbreakable pain. You look down at the city lights, millions of miles away. You look back at the golden cage they built for you. You remember the broken door. You thought you were bending the law to survive. Now you have become the system's darkest secret, locked away forever.